I think for Brooklyn, this ends up being a trade you probably have to do. In terms of giving up all the picks they gave up, it's 3 unprotected picks and 4 swaps.
Hmm.
So the reason they did this, I think, at the end of the day, is because they're not sure what's going on with Kyrie. There's a chance that Kyrie could just retire, that he could just not play this season, that he could sit out for the playoffs. Like we've seen from the years past, that Kyrie isn't a guy you can really rely on. I think at the end of the day, the Nets looked at this and they said, we have Kevin Durant in his prime right now. We don't know what's going on with Kyrie. Let's get another all-NBA player. And I think at the end of the day, even though the picks are going to be tough, I think you had to do this trade for Harden. You know, they'll all the players. So the way it's breaking down right now is Harden, Kyrie, and Durant all have player options for the 2022-2023 season. So after that season, there's no guarantee that they will have any of those players. And so after that, you're still giving up 3, maybe 4 first-round picks where you have no guarantee that you could have those players on your team. So that is a huge risk. However, this makes them, in my eyes, the favorite in the East this year to come out and play the Lakers.
Yeah.
And this gives you Kyrie insurance. Just in case Kyrie goes out and does whatever he wants, you still have Harden next to Durant.
Yeah, I think that like my personal opinion about the picks is that initially you'll hear like 8 first round picks and you'll be like really scared about it. But when you really break down like what the picks are, so the 2021 pick swap it's gonna mean nothing, right? Because 100% the Rockets are gonna finish with a worse record than the Nets this season. So like that's basically you're gonna keep your pick. So that's not a big deal. 2022 you can probably predict that they'd be pretty good considering all 3 of them are going to be there, including and also I think even like 2023 is a pick swap. Like that's kind of debatable how good that.
Swap.
Yeah, so like how good that's going to be. So it's kind of like 3 of those picks you're not that worried about, and then the 2022 from Milwaukee, obviously that's not yours, so you don't care about. So I would say like 4 of these first round picks are probably going to be in the mid 20s. You know, if the Nets are win the championship in the 30s or in the 30th pick. So I don't know if it's like the haul from face value versus what it actually is. Like I wouldn't be that concerned. Obviously, losing Durant, Kyrie, and Harden would be bad. But yeah, I think what you hit on is the most is that in like a COVID season, and we've seen this with like the Sixers and the Celtics and all these teams that have missed or postponed games because of players being out. Like having like 2 of the top 8 players, like if Kyrie and KD got COVID, Harden can still win you games on his own. So that would mean a lot. Like we've already seen this year that KD was out for 4 straight games because of COVID protocols. And that just makes it so much harder for the Nets. But now you have Harden, you can still win against teams that you should be beating and not worry about your standing as much. Which they don't have a good record right now, which is objective, you know. I think they're like around 500.
Yeah, so I mean, this definitely gives you insurance in that sense, in that you could put out one of Harden or Durant. Some nights, even just having Kyrie out there, and you have a good chance to win that game, regardless of who the other players on the court are.
Yeah.
Where it ties you up is even when you get to that 2022-2023 season, Harden's going to be 33, Kyrie's going to be 30, and Durant's going to be 34. So you're faced with the tough decision of, are you going to pay these 3 guys who are all going to be past their age 30 season? You know, are you going to pay them for the next couple of years? Because that in itself is a risk. And then, but if you don't pay them, then there's probably no path to championship contention for the next 4 years after that because you don't have your picks.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can win a championship this year, then everyone kind of forgets about that and you kind of move on, you figure it out, and you do things similar to what the Cavs are doing, where you take on some distressed assets, you know, you work around the picks you have, and you can figure something out. I'm sure if you asked anyone in Cleveland, they would say it's fine that they've struggled for the past 3 or 4 years because they did get that one championship.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, you got to do it. Where this team, I think this team is the favorite in the East. Their depth is getting a little bit hairy, especially when you match against the Lakers.
Mm-hmm.
Now that DeAndre Jordan is the only center on that team who has any NBA experience at all, I think losing Jared Allen makes it really tough for you to match up with AD and LeBron in the next round because you really lose a lot of your size. I mean, the next
Yeah.
the next biggest guy is Jeff Green on their roster right now, who really
Oh,
has
Nick Claxton.
unless you'd like Claxton.
I like Claxton.
What do you think about the Nets' depth right now? And a lot of it's been made about their defense as well, about their defense maybe slipping up too. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think before this trade, the Nets had one of the deepest rosters in the league. I mean, think about they lost their starting, I guess, two guard or point guard in Dinwiddie, whatever you want to call them. And they were still like, they could just put LeVert in there and they were 100% exactly fine. That says a lot about how deep they were. But now when you're looking at the roster, like last night, there was no Kyrie, it was just KD. KD had like 30, and then Bruce Brown had 15 points and 14
Bruce
rebounds.
Brown's okay. He's okay.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I
But
definitely
you're relying on Shamit now. Like Shamit is going to play a big role for this team in the playoffs.
yeah. It's
Luau
definitely
Cabarrot too.
yeah.
He's okay.
They're like fine role players, but they definitely are going to need to pick up some dudes from the G League or sign some free agents. I'm not really sure who's out there right now, but they clearly don't have any moves left, I'd say. So this is kind of it. I would be really concerned at the 5. I think that sneakily, like the really good teams all have pretty good centers. Like in the East, Embiid, there's Jokic, AD obviously is a big problem. Like that can be a problem given certain matchups. Like I just don't know who would guard Embiid for this team, which would scare me.
I agree. So they have a couple of moves left to make. They have their mid-level exception of 5.7 million. They have the minimum exceptions they could do. So if someone buys out and wants to come join their team for the minimum, and then they're probably going to be able to get the disabled player exception from Spencer Dinwiddie getting hurt. So they have moves that they can make to add marginal players. It's going to be a question of what center is going to be available in the buyout market at that point. But I think at the end of the day, you had to make this move, because you didn't watching that Nets team last night. They're fine, but you're not winning a championship with just KD, and Kyrie is nothing right now. You don't know if he's going to be back or anything.
Yeah, I
and
just
even
pulled
though,
up. Oh, sorry. You can go. You go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, even though this team, the defense may be a problem because they don't really have any above average players besides Durant. However, I think to use Harden's defense at the start of the season against him is kind of unfair because he was clearly on a team that he didn't care about, that he didn't want to play on.
Yeah, but
so Harden's not an elite defender, but he'll be better, right? He'll try, hopefully.
He'll be better, but it's not like before this he was a great defender. You know what I'm saying? Like
I agree.
Still
I don't think before this the Nets were all that great of a team. So here's my one thing about the trade. Well, besides that, did you have to give up 8 picks? Could you have maybe got down to like 6 or 7 and saved yourself 2 years? That it's hard to say. I mean, but did you have to give up Jared Allen? I think that's the biggest. Did you have to give up Jared Allen because he's not even going to the Rockets? He's going to the Cavs. Was this like a DeAndre Jordan kind of thing that they wanted to make DeAndre feel better and have the only player?
No,
I would feel a lot better about this team if they had Jared Allen. But it seems like they rerouted him for, I don't know, because the Rockets wanted Dante Exum and like pick over him.
I think the pick. I think it was the pick. And just before we go into this, I just wanted to point out a couple of big men I have that are available right now as like free agent options. And we're looking at Jordan Bell, Dragon Bender, Jonah Bolden. Besides that, like people they could sign like Corey Brewer maybe. Damari Carroll, like it's not looking great. Like I guess Tyson Chandler. So it's slim pickings out here in terms of what they have as an option from the big man. I'm sure we'll see somebody get signed. But yeah, I don't know. We could talk about that too. That's like a little bit weird. I think like when it comes down to negotiating whether or not it's 6 picks or 8 picks, like at the end of the day, if you really want Harden, like the Rockets have all the leverage there, right? Like they're going to be like, we're just going to take Philadelphia's offer or whatever, and you just have to give them 8 picks. So I don't really fault them for that. But yeah, losing Jared Allen for a Milwaukee 2022, I find it so hard to believe that he's worth a Milwaukee 2022. That just seems ridiculous to me. He's been great this season. He starts center for them. He's a good defensive option.
Yeah, I mean, he's 11 points and 10 rebounds, coming off the bench for a good portion of the season too, and then recently starting over DeAndre. Yeah. I think that's really tough. LeVert, like you're not too worried about LeVert when you get Harden. I think that was always kind of like an extra piece for them where it was
They need
nice
to
to
move
have him,
him.
but it wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's tough to lose Jared Allen
I
because
agree.
now you're really relying on DeAndre who's definitely past a point in his career where he's not as effective as he is. But I think also there's something to be said about this team's defense being a little bit better because if you have Harden and Durant out there, right, neither of those two guys has to play as hard offensively. Like you can take off a little bit of effort there and put in a little bit more effort defensively when the playoffs when it gets tough in the playoffs. And I also think we have to remember that James Harden is a top 5 NBA player, probably, right?
Yeah.
Top
Yeah.
5, top 8, whatever you want to put him as.
Exactly. Yeah.
And his biggest deficiency and knock on him was his performance in the playoffs. Well, now you have two guys on this team, two guys, hopefully, if Kyrie comes back, who are very proven at making the last shot in the playoffs. So now you've gotten rid of your biggest problem with Harden and turning over the team to Harden is that you're a little nervous about him in the last 2 minutes of a tight playoff game. But now you have Durant and now you have Kyrie who can, take that last shot for him. And you have Harden for the other 46 minutes of offense like that. I think that's perfect for them. And I think no other team in the East really has the offensive firepower to be able to match them in a 7-game series. If they have all three of those guys like firing on all cylinders, I don't know what team can outscore them. Now, if they only have Harden and Durant, then it becomes a little bit more dicey because then I think you don't have all of the offense you may need. And if the defense is struggling, then maybe one of those teams can beat them. But
I think that if we're just looking on paper, this is one of the greatest big threes of offense that we've ever seen. I think that you don't even have to say these. There's no team in the league that can stop this team fully healthy, full stop. Genuinely, I don't think it. Like Harden is clearly one of the at least top 10 greatest offensive players of all time. I would say he's probably top 5. Same with Durant.
They're in the same. The greatest.
Yeah, both of them are completely unstoppable. Kyrie has hit multiple game-winning shots in his career, like you said. So I'm not worried about that end. But what I am worried about is that it's like the reason the Lakers were good last year is you had AD and LeBron that were monsters on offense. You didn't really need to worry about their offense. But Frank Vogel coached the team to a top 5 defensive team. And in the playoffs, they were a great defensive team. They stopped everyone. But Steve Nash and his lead assistant, who is Mike D'Antoni, are not known for their defense, right? Like, you don't need D'Antoni. Who also, I was thinking about this. How does D'Antoni feel about getting fired from the Rockets? Getting Harden. I'm not sure how he feels. But you don't need like Steve Nash and D'Antoni, who are like offensive geniuses, to coach a team that like me and you could coach this team and they'd score 140. They need a coach that knows something on defense. And I'm not saying that like they are stupid on defense. I'm just saying that like it's a lot. It's overkill. Like, are you expecting to be like a better version of the Nuggets where you're just gonna outscore everyone like 150 a game? It seems kind of unreasonable.
I think this team's ultimate identity when they're playing against some of the better teams in the East, probably save the Sixers with Embiid, is I think they probably end up putting Jeff Green in for DeAndre Jordan, and they close with Kyrie, Harden, Joe Harris, Durant, Jeff Green. You switch everything 1 through 5, so that helps out a little bit. Jeff Green's not a plus defender either, but that team can just score. Like, they're a shoot. Every single person you need to run out and like guard them shooting. And I mean, that's kind of been the Nets' identity this year is they're not super worried about defense. They, are scorers. They're going to try and outscore you. They're going to try and outgun you.
Durant
I think
was really good at defense.
Yeah, I think you could do it.
Yeah.